Mute yourselves. Hello, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on this National Geographic Learning Linguist webinar for New Close-Up, or conference, I should say. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes to allow everyone into the room. So just while we're waiting, please do let us know where you are joining us from in Ukraine today, or maybe outside of Ukraine. Let us know in the chat box, which I can see some of you have found already. Hi, Oksana from Kiev. Also, just a little bit of housekeeping before we start as well. The session is being recorded. So if for any reason you have to dash out to do something and miss part of the webinar, that's okay. You will be sent a link to the recording of the webinar in 24 hours time. So after the webinar tomorrow. You'll also be sent a certificate at some point as well, which should be within that same email. So don't worry, certificates will be provided for you. I know they're important for your own professional development. And in terms of the interaction today, we will be using the chat box throughout the session. But if you do have any very specific questions, please make sure you use the Q&A box. Use that only for questions rather than for comments, okay? Sometimes people use it for comments and we miss them, so just use the chat. And when you are using the chat, please make sure you are sending your message to everyone and not just to the hosts and the panelists, to allow everyone to join in the conversation. Okay, so I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, Tim Pearce, who is going to open the conference for us officially, and I will see you all very shortly. Tim, over to you.
Thank you very, very much, Alex. And it's a pleasure to be here today. And it's great to see so many people online. I can see we have people from all over the country, which is great. So thank you again ever so much for joining. We'll give people a few minutes to let's say to just come in before we start. So we'll be starting in about probably 4 or 5 minutes. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Just give me 1 second. Just 1 second here. Just a second. Alex, can you see my screen in full? Or no, not? We can see your I didn't think so. I'm unable to actually get to where I was before.
Click on display settings, Tim.
I can't, it's hidden. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Let me just see if I click here. Sorry, guys, give me 1 second.
We'll be with you shortly.
It's there at the top. I can see it, but the Zoom bar at the top is hiding.
You can drag that down to the bottom, Tim.
Can I drag that down? Just give me 1 second. There we go. Brilliant. Thank you for your expert advice, Alex. Very much appreciated. Okay, so welcome to the English Teachers Day for Ukraine. There are a few things I would like to say before we get started. So the first thing is I would like to deeply thank our partners in Ukraine, Linguist, for all the work they've done on this conference as well. I think we know Linguist is a great partner to have, and we're very proud to be working with Linguist. So I would particularly like to say a big thanks to all of the team at Linguist. And I would also like to say a big thanks to Diana Golovan from Linguist, who has been the National Geographic Learning rep over the last few years. Now, today is a bit of a bittersweet moment, I think, for us. I mean, it's great to have everybody here, but sadly, this will probably be Diana's last conference as the National Geographic Learning rep, as she's been promoted into a new position at Linguist. So, I mean, please do join me in congratulating Diana on her promotion. And she's done an excellent job over the last few years. So Diana, congratulations.
Thank you, Tim. It was a real pleasure to be working with all your team. And actually, I have lots of memories, great memories from working. And it's I'm really proud that I was somehow I was connected with such a great publishing house. And I believe that all teachers here know that National Geographic Learning makes great professional textbooks that help bring students closer to life. So many thanks to team for support, especially for support for Ukrainian teachers, which you have done in the last half of the year. It values a lot for us. Thank really you. I would like to say thank you for Alex for support, for making these conferences happen and enjoy so teachers enjoy them. I always hear lots of positive feedbacks from the teacher after our events. And Flo, unfortunately, it wasn't so much time that I've known you, but anyway, I remember your professional webinar last time, and I wish to see more of them in Ukraine.
Thank you, Diana. It's been a pleasure. And I think, like you said, I'm also extremely grateful to all my colleagues for all the work they've done in Ukraine, particularly over the last 6 months as well. And we look forward to a very bright future together. And I think on that note and about the future, I would like to introduce everybody to our new National Geographic Learning Rep in Ukraine, Irina. Irina, are you there? Can you turn your camera and microphone on, Irina?
Yes.
Hi there, Irina. Do you want to just say a few words to introduce yourself to everybody?
Thank you, Tim. It's a pleasure to meet you all, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on other future events, so cheerful and so active as we are continuing our collaboration. So thank you. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much, Irina, and welcome on board.
Thank you.
Okay, just slightly moving on. So we have a great lineup today and some great talks coming up. Alex is going to kick us off with Connect 4, the importance of connections in language learning. We will then have a talk by Diana called Hack Project Work with Teens. We will then have a very short break where I will say 1 or 2 words. And then Flo will finish us off with tapping into team spirit. So I think with all that in mind, Alex, I'm going to hand over to you without further ado so you can do your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Cheers. Right. Let's get my screen up on the board. There we go. Hopefully you can all see that absolutely fine. So yeah, as Tim mentioned, I'm talking all about connections and the importance of connections in language learning. So a word of warning before I start, for those of you who've been to my webinars before, which I know will be many of you, you'll know that I like to try to make them as interactive, as participatory as possible. So your comments in the chat box are really very much appreciated. And I want to start with a question for you guys. And it's this: what kind of connections do learners have to make to facilitate effective language learning, do you think? So what kind of connections do they need to make, or do we need to help them make within their learning experiences? Let me know any thoughts or ideas in the chat box. What kind of connections can facilitate this whole learning process? What do we think? Suggestions. People still saying hello in the chat box. Hi. Okay, perfect. Yeah, Julie, lovely. Yeah, connection with real life. Absolutely right. So important. A personal or an emotional connection. Absolutely, Svetlana. I agree totally. Anyone else got any suggestions? There's only 2 of them which we're going to look at. Warm and friendly. I think that only comes into it to an extent within a sort of a wider framework, I'd say. Intercultural, interpersonal. So I think with intercultural, we're talking there really about kind of connecting to the wider world, to the real world, the global world. Interpersonal. So with peers and teachers, exactly, Hannah, right? It's important to make those connections with each other in the classroom. Any other suggestions? So it's interactive. So I'd again put that with connections with each other, with their classmates. Any more ideas or thoughts? Interactive emotional connections, yeah. Child-centered or learner-focused. Absolutely. Any others? Any others? No? Okay, that's fine, not to worry. We're going to look at some of these in a little bit more detail. The four that I think are probably the most important. And they all facilitate that learning process ultimately. And the first one I want to look at is this idea of connecting to each other and the teacher. And the reason this is so important is because we need to have an environment in the classroom where students feel safe, where they feel supported, where they have positive relationships with each other, which means that they can actually have the confidence to use the language which they are learning. We hear so often that one of the main reasons students don't like to talk in class is because they're scared that they're going to make a mistake, that their classmates might criticize them. And this is the exact opposite of really what we want to achieve. We need to have an environment in the classroom where it is super positive. They're helping each other, they're supporting each other. There is empathy, there is trust. And if we can create this kind of environment through making connections between each other, then that lays the bedrock, lays the foundation for more effective, more efficient language learning. And as Fredericks points out, students who have those positive relationships with their peers have been found to have high levels of engagement, high levels of motivation, and high levels of achievement. Let me know in the chat box, do you want your students to have those three things? More engagement, more motivation, more achievement? Absolutely, yes, 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 yes. Of course we do, right? So we need to think right at the beginning of the academic year, how are we going to create this environment? How are we going to build these relationships between our learners? Because like I said, that will have the positive impact on everything else that happens in the classroom. So yeah, and there are four kind of main ingredients we need to consider here. We need to have activities that promote trust, empathy, and acceptance. We need activities that promote group cohesiveness. And by this, I mean a feeling of us against the world, so the whole class, rather than just individuals. And connected to that is this whole idea of collaboration. By collaboration, I don't just mean pair work and normal group work, but pair work and group work where there is a defined goal, where they have to work together to achieve something. And we need to promote that idea of shared responsibility within the classroom. And that shared responsibility is not just teacher to student, but student to student as well. They have a responsibility to each other and to the class as a whole. And it isn't just the responsibility of the teachers to create that atmosphere, to be responsible for everything that happens in the classroom. And course books are generally very good at giving students opportunities to work together, but very often it's just surface type activities, where it's pair work, discuss these questions with each other, find out a little bit more about each other, like these examples here. Which job would you most like to do and why? Would you describe yourself as curious? Do you prefer indoor or outdoor sports? These activities are fine, but they're what I call surface activities in terms of building those relationships. Yes, you get to know a little bit about each other, but you're not building that trust. You're not building that empathy. You're not building that collaboration through these activities. Although that's not to say they're not important, because they are important, because the more I know somebody, the more I might like them, the more I feel trust, the more trust I might feel with that person. But really, it's activities where we're getting under the skin, where they are working together, where they are sharing responsibility, let's say. And at the heart of that is this whole idea of teamwork and working together as a team. Because essentially that's what you're doing as a class. That's what you want them to achieve ultimately. So we've got this lesson here from New Close Up on how to work in a team effectively. And there are 5 points that they say you need to be able to do, or 5 emotions, I guess, that you need to have working in a group. So in the chat box, What do you think are the 5 things that students need to be able to do or to be aware of to work effectively in a team? Any guesses, any thoughts? Let me know in the chat box. Okay, praise. Yeah, you need to sort of praise each other. Definitely. I agree with that, Natasha. So that's giving confidence, support, having empathy, having tolerance, accepting other viewpoints. Definitely, Ala. Julia, absolutely right. You have to listen. You have to be a good listener in a team. Of course, they should have friendly relationships in a team. Definitely, Olga. What else do you suggest? Trust. Yeah, but how do we build that trust? Cooperation. Thank you, Ala, again. Curiosity. I'm not sure that's necessarily within teamwork itself. Tolerance again, yeah, it's coming through. Yeah, that acceptance is really, really important. People have different ideas. Flexibility, Julia, couldn't agree more. Thoughtfulness, which I guess come to an extent with tolerance and acceptance. Responsibility, okay. Lots of good ideas coming through. The 5 I'm going to share, I'm not saying these are the golden rules, but they are things which are important. I think we need to be reliable. We need to trust each other. We need to have reliability. We need to make sure that we are all contributing, that we're all pulling our weight, so to speak. In other words, we need to do our share. How often are we doing group work tasks and 2 or 3 students just do all the work? They bulldoze the way through. Or maybe you've got students who just sit back and let the others do it because they don't want to be involved. So it's having roles within activities. So if you're doing some kind of project work, making sure everyone has a defined job, a defined role to do, because they are therefore relying on each other and doing their fair share of the work. You all mentioned this idea of supporting team members, giving them praise, like you said, helping them out if they're struggling, working together. A few of you said about listening. So underrated when it comes to teamwork. We have to listen to what each other says. We need to take on board their views, their opinions, their ideas. And if we don't agree with it, that's okay, but we have to discuss and explain why we may not disagree with it and why another way might be better. You need to be able to communicate your ideas clearly within a team. And respect. And I think this comes with the idea of the tolerance, the idea of accepting others as well, respecting each other. If you don't respect each other within a team, then that's not going to really help the team work effectively and efficiently. And I think that reflects really the bigger picture of a classroom environment. You should see, not just within groups in a class when they're doing a project or some group work, but as a class as a whole. These apply to everybody in the class. So it might be that we set these up as a kind of rules in the classroom. And so this lesson kind of explores this whole idea of working in a team and gives some kind of nice examples of what to do and what not to do. So for example, here, we've got activity 3. So rewrite the replies in the conversation. What would a good team player say? So number 1, let's ask Carl to give the presentation. No way, Lee is much better. Clearly that response is not very diplomatic. So what might we say instead, do you think, that may be less hurtful to Lee, to Carl? Any suggestions? Pop them in the chat box for me. And obviously this kind of activity, this is raising students' awareness of how they speak to each other, how they respect one another. Right? Yeah, clearly that no way is really rude. So what can we say instead? You could say something to soften it. Well, actually, you know what? Carl's a really good idea, but Lee, from previous experience, I've seen him do some presentations which are really good. Maybe we should ask Lee to do it, for example. Lovely, Olga. That's even better. Let Lee help Carl and they can do it together. Really nice, really diplomatic. Let's look at number 3 as well. Do one more example. Who should we ask to plan the event? Don't ask Erica. She won't do a good job. Poor Erica. That is really not a very nice thing to say within the team. So how might we say that or express those views, opinions in a more friendly way, let's say? Let me know in the chat. Any thoughts? Try to get some creativity. Yeah, lovely. Yeah, what if we do this? Good. Very nice way. Why don't we? Exactly, Svetlana, as well. Why don't we ask Nick and Erica could help? Lovely. So we're thinking about how the bigger picture and how the team can work well, effectively together, supporting each other, listening to each other, respecting each other, and doing our fair share. So this kind of activity really raises that awareness. And the kind of activities which facilitate this process is, of course, collaborative project work. So, I'm a big fan of project work, whether it's with young learners, whether it's with teenage learners, whether it's with adult learners, because it teaches them so many great skills, from collaboration to communication, critical thinking, creativity. But really, it helps them to work together as a team. So one of the features of New Close-Up is the inclusion of different projects in these lessons, where they have to work together. It is collaborative. It's not just talk to your partner and find out some information about them, that kind of surface getting to know you. This way, they have to rely on each other. They have to do their share. They have to communicate their ideas. They have to respect each other. They have to listen to each other. So it's really developing those bonds, those relationships in the classroom. And that's really what we want to achieve as much as possible. But it doesn't have to be a big project like this. It could just be speaking activities. So here are some examples of some first certificate style collaboration tasks where they have to work together to come up with a solution, to make suggestions. So yes, they might be exam tasks, but on a deeper level, it's teaching students to show respect and to work together. And if they're working together, it's building those bonds, building those relationships. But there's something more that we can do to ensure the empathy, the trust, the respect that we want within the classroom. And that is bringing the idea of peer teaching and peer assessment into our classes as much as possible. Because this involves direct interaction between the students, as well as promoting independence, autonomy, and active learning. It develops those interpersonal skills too. And certainly, the whole idea of peer teaching, peer assessment is not something new. It dates back to the times of Aristotle in 5th century Athens, where he used student leaders to help organize his classes, to teach the younger students. So it's not a new concept, and it's one that's been becoming sort of increasingly popular again over the last 30 or 40 years, especially in classes where there may be mixed ability. But the point here is that there is a wealth of evidence that peer teaching is extremely effective for a wide range of goals, content, and students of different levels and personalities. So not only does it develop relationships, it enables greater achievement in the class. So one way in which we can do this is, of course, through peer teaching of grammar, peer teaching of vocabulary. And to facilitate this process, using an inductive or a guided discovery approach to grammar can be really beneficial. So here we've got a lesson on the first conditional, and it's not the teacher standing at the front of the class saying, right, this is the first and zero conditional, this is how we make it, this is how we use it. It's a case of putting students into pairs or to groups and working together to understand the usage of the grammar, the form of the grammar as well. In other words, they are working together to achieve a unified goal, whereby they have to listen to each other. they're collaborating, and that can build trust. It can build empathy within the classroom. And the same can be said for vocabulary as well. I think I've got the slides slightly mixed up here, but that's okay. So that's one way of doing peer teaching. In this case, it's looking at peer feedback. And you can argue that this has even greater impact on the relationships in the classroom. And I know that when I get students to give feedback to one another, they don't generally like doing it because they don't like to be critical of each other. But actually, if it's done in the right way, in a supportive way, with the right tone, with the right kind of vocabulary, it can actually be far more beneficial than teacher feedback. So for example, here in this writing lesson, it's a reflection checklist for yourself from a piece of writing. But actually the way I would do this, I would get my students to swap their answers and to look at each other's work based on these criteria. So did my partner use phrases to express their opinion? Did they give examples? Did they use new paragraphs for each point, etc.? And then they give feedback to each other. So it builds that joint responsibility and trust to each other. And to help them do that, we can introduce something like the peer feedback, or the ladder of feedback into the class, of which there are 4 steps. So the first step is that you should clarify anything. So before giving any feedback to students on their work, ask questions about any clear points or missing ideas. Then they should value. Comment on the strengths of the work, create a supportive environment, and then stress the positive, the interesting points. What did they do well? Then you can address any concerns that you might have with your colleague, your partner's work. Comment on concerns, areas that need attention, what's missing, but it should be done in a really non-threatening way. And of course, you can provide them with language to support them with that. And then the last point, can you guess what the last point is of the ladder, the last step of the ladder? Can anyone tell me in the chat box? What is the final step of that ladder? Any guesses? We've got clarify, we've got value, we've got concerns, we've got, finally, what should the students do with each other? They said the good points, they said the bad points. They need to praise, or praise comes under value. Comment, I'd say Svetlana fits in nicely with suggestions, right? Offer suggestions on how to improve the work. Ideas that will help them to think about the way forward, right? So maybe the students got lots of mistakes with prepositions or with articles, whatever it might be. And say, okay, I can see you've got a problem here with articles. There's a really good activity on this website, or why don't you look at the reference in the back of the book for the grammar summary, right? It's making suggestions. And that in itself builds trust between each other. If you want to do it in a less maybe kind of formal way, one activity is called 2 stars and a wish. 2 stars and a wish is really nice. It's just basically students write 2 positive comments, the stars, and 1 constructive comment on the wish. So this was good, this was good. I wish you'd put something more on this, for example. Another example is called tag. Tag is an acronym for tell something you like, the T. A is ask a question, and G is give a positive suggestion. And then another one on the variation of it is called plus minus what's next. So what was done well is the plus, what needs work is the minus, and what could you do, or what strategies could be used to improve on that performance. So essentially what we're doing here, we're putting the learning, the feedback in the hands of the students. And in doing so, we strengthen those relationships. And, you know, students aren't going to be really horrible to their partners because their partner then might be horrible back. They need to be aware of that and use appropriate language. Okay, so just to sum up that first point about creating connections between the students. Studies have shown that when learners work in groups, it leads to improved achievement. retention of learning, and social relationships, as well as increasing intrinsic motivation. It can lessen the stress of contributing in a whole class situation and give more time for learners to work at their own pace. So build connections between students, build those relationships. Okay, that was number one. Number two connection is all about connecting to prior learning. Now, David Aswell, long time ago, said that prior knowledge is the most important single factor in influencing learning. Ascertain this and teach them accordingly. And I think it's absolutely right. Maybe it's not the most important thing, but it's certainly important because we need to know what students already know. We need to link what they are doing in today's lesson with any prior knowledge that they have. We need to link it to the previous lesson. We need to link it to the lesson in the previous week. It's all about making those connections between lessons that we're having and those lessons and that student knowledge. And so this comes from the schema theory, and it has so many implications of what we do in the classroom. So one activity I really like doing and is really effective to make sure that we are making those connections, that we are making those links to prior learning, is to use entry tickets in the classroom. So I'm not sure if you're aware of what entry tickets are or whether or not you use them, but if you do, let me know in the chat box, what are they and what advantages do they bring to your classroom? So let me know in the chat box, what are they? What are the advantages of using them? Do you think? And if you've used them in the classroom, what benefits have you seen from doing so? Thoughts, ideas. Okay, yeah, it could be to revise vocabulary grammar from the previous lesson, yeah. I mean, they're very, very flexible in how you use them. I think that's the kind of key thing. Okay, I'm going to tell you. They're essentially diagnostic. They're an effective strategy for monitoring students' learning and introducing or reviewing instruction. So it might be that you're reviewing something from the previous day and you want to see how much they've remembered. Or it could be that you're going to be doing a lesson on a certain topic or a certain grammar, and you want to know how much they already know on that. So, for example, we might be doing a unit all about the digital world, and I want to know how much they know about technology already. What vocabulary do they know? So we do an entry ticket of write down all the words you know connected to technology, for example. Or if it's a lesson all about adjectives of personality, what do you already know? Do a quick brainstorm of that existing knowledge. And then you, the teacher, can say, okay, they all know a lot of these words already, and that can impact on how I will teach that lesson. But it's making those connections. What do they already know? Another example, maybe we're teaching a lesson all about the passive. And even before I open up the book and say, okay, look at the first exercise, I want to know what they already know, because maybe they have knowledge. So it could just be a simple question of, what do you already know about the passive? Write a sentence using the passive, or try and write a sentence using the passive. Alternatively, it could just be getting them put on a scale. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how confident are you using the passive? Or whichever grammar point it might be. But the point is, I'm activating that schemata of my students to my current lesson. So when they're coming into it, they know what they're going to be doing, and they've already got that background knowledge, which they can draw upon. We mentioned earlier about how the guided discovery, the inductive approach can really facilitate this, how it helps peer teaching, but it can also facilitate this process as well, about activating that existing knowledge. So, you know, we're looking here, we've got a couple of sentences and then matching them to the rules of the passive and the active there. But to do that, they're already drawing on their existing knowledge of the passive, or maybe more specifically, the active in this case. So really, the guided discovery approach is activating their schemata, finding out what they know, and if they don't know too much, they're working it out for themselves. It's just part of that learning process. And I think this quite kind of sums up the importance of it. Call it schema, relevant background knowledge, prior knowledge, or just plain experience. When students make connections to a text or grammar, whatever it is they're learning, their comprehension increases. I think specifically with reading text, which can be quite dense, this is really true. The more they bring of themselves to the text, as Jeremy Harmer said, the better their understanding, the greater their comprehension. And when we're talking about schema, we're talking about sort of different things here. We're talking about linguistic schema in terms of the language, the vocabulary that they're bringing to it. So we've got here an article about the brain. I might say to you, okay, what words do you know connected to the brain? What verbs do we do connected to the brain? Think, remember, understand. Maybe things like neurons and so forth can, might appear in the text, but it's activating that linguistic schemata. It's also activating the content schemata, the actual knowledge of the subject. What do you know about the brain, or what do you know about whatever activity or whichever reading we're doing? Okay. So just as an example of that, we've got here an article all about satellites. So imagine we are going to do a reading. Imagine we're going to do this reading, and I want you to tell me what kind of words you think might appear in this reading. I'm just going to hide it so you can't cheat. So it's a reading all about satellites. What words might appear in the text, do you think? Tell me in the chat. Space, of course, space, Ala, thank you. What other words might appear? Maybe extraterrestrial, aliens, maybe. Astronauts. Rockets, spacecraft, engineering. There's no right or wrong answer when it comes to this activity, and that's quite a nice thing about it. It's just like, what do you think might appear? Technology, of course, yes. So once we've kind of activated the kind of linguistic schemata, the vocabulary, we can then activate the content schemata. What do they know about satellites already? So to help them do that, we're going to use a good old KWL chart. I'm sure you all use these. I love these, whether I'm teaching young learners, teens, adults, academic students. They're really beneficial for activating that schemata. What do you already know about satellites? What do they do? How do they get up there? Etc., etc. Then, what do I want to know? And then we come back to the learn. But really, the key part here for me is what I know. Making those links to what I know, or the existing learning, and the lesson I'm having now. And especially that's important for the reading, because reading is often, it's a two-way process. You're bringing your existing knowledge, and the text is giving you other knowledge. And you need both of those to create understanding, to create comprehension of that text. It's a two-way process. Quadricopters for Ukraine. Okay, lovely. So we can do entry tickets for grammar, or activating schemata for grammar, reading, but also for vocabulary, specifically pre-teaching vocabulary. And I think all too often as teachers, I've seen this in observed classes, teachers stand at the front and they pre-teach vocabulary, regardless of whether their students know it or don't know it. the fact is the teacher doesn't know. They're assuming they don't know it, hence why they are pre-teaching it. So this activity is one that I actually learned from a teacher in Ukraine several years ago. At a conference I was attending, I was sort of chatting to her, and she told me about this activity, which I've taken on board and I love using. And it's really simple. It's just called words I know, words I think I know, words I don't know. So we have all of these words here. And instead of me standing at the front and pre-teaching them all to the students, I say, okay, I want you to put them into different boxes. Words you know, words you think you know, words you don't know. And then as a teacher, I'm monitoring, I'm looking around, seeing which words are going into which boxes. And then I put my students into pairs or into groups, and they work together. So let's say, for example, I put the word equipment in words I know, but my partner has put it in words I don't know. This then allows me to peer teach that word to my partner. So again, building those relationships, building that trust in the classroom. Maybe we both put the word engineer in words I think I know. We can then work together to negotiate what it means. So, well, I think it means this. Really? I think it means this. So you can negotiate, work together, collaborate again. But the point is, it's tapping into what students already know and then teaching them appropriately, and of course, getting them to peer teach. So a really nice way to dig into the idea of connecting to prior learning. Okay, let's move on because time is going to run out. Number 3 is all about connecting to themselves. For learning to be meaningful, it has to be meaningful to them. I'm learning a language to use it for myself, about myself in my life. Therefore, it is absolutely paramount that we make as many connections to the students' lives as possible. Because otherwise they're like, why am I learning English? Well, you're learning English because we're going to make it connected to your life. And this quote from Gertrude Moscovich from her book, Caring and Sharing in the Foreign Language Class, really sums it up for me, of what we should be trying to achieve. So transfer to the textbook is easier when the content starts with the student himself or herself and then leads into the materials to be learned. Let the students first discover what they can generate on the subject from their own personal thoughts and feelings. By drawing on their own experiences and reactions, the transfer to the textbook becomes more relevant, more apparent. So how might we achieve this? Well, first of all, I do have to say that coursebooks are generally very good at making these connections, but there's still more that we can do as teachers. So one of my favorite things to do when we have a new unit in the book is to do something called photograph the theme. So let's say we have a unit all about where we live. So before we start teaching the unit, I would ask my students, I'll tell my students rather, that next week we're going to be doing a unit on where we live. I want you to take photos of where you live. And we're going to come into class next week, and I want you to share your pictures with each other and talk about where you live. And the reason this works so well is students love talking, well, A, they love talking about themselves, but B, they love talking about photos that they have taken. They generally live on their phones, tablets, looking at pictures, commenting on photos, you know, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, whatever. It's all about that visual input. Unit about fashion. Okay, what do I think is fashion? You can take pictures of people in the street, in clothes stores, and, you know, shop windows, at home, whatever you want. You bring it in, you talk about that's fashion to me. Delicious. Well, what do I think is delicious? I'm going to take pictures of my favorite foods. It might be something my mum's cooked. It might be something in a restaurant. It might be something that you can buy in a fast food restaurant. Just take a photo of it. This for me is delicious. And I have to say, this has never failed to work in my classes because, like I say, students love talking, taking their phones out, talking about their photos, things that they like. So that's one way in which you can make those connections to self. Another way to make connection to self is specifically here using sort of unit openers, images, like we have in National Geographic Learning Products, is the I see, I think, I wonder routine. So the first two, obviously, well, the first one is I see, it's what I can see in the picture, but the I think and the I wonder are making it more personal. I think this is happening in this photo. I think this is here, there, wherever. I wonder, well, it's what I wonder. It's personal to me. It's my thoughts. I wonder what's going on. I wonder what the dragons represent. I wonder how often this is. I wonder what's actually going on. I wonder what this great big green thing is. Whenever I look at this green thing, I think it looks like a turtle to me. I don't know why. I just see a turtle. You've got the shell, the head, the legs on the side. But it's getting a personal reaction, right? It might not be linking to their own experiences, but it's a personal reaction. Or we can ask other kind of questions like this. How does it make you feel and why? Does it remind you of anything? What events, festivals are there where you live, for example? Now, I'm just interested here. How does this photo make you feel? Tell me in the chat box. What emotions come to the surface for you when you see this picture? For me, I feel excitement. I don't know why, particularly, but I just feel excitement when I see this picture. And maybe a little bit of curiosity. But how does it make you feel? Confused, says Natasha. Yeah, I can understand why that might be. It's a bit peculiar. Vacational, curious, intrigued. Thank you, Hannah and Svetlana. Any other thoughts? Okay. So just ways in which you can use photos to make connections to self. Like I say, it doesn't always have to be about their own experiences. It can just be about their thoughts, their views, their opinions about something. But like I say, coursewoods are generally very good at making these connections. So here we've got from a unit all about education. The first questions are, which school subjects do you enjoy most? Are any of the subjects below taught at your school? If not, which one would you like to learn and why? And one of the key features of the new Close-Up series is the Your Ideas section at the end of every lesson. Are you interested in any of the activities mentioned in the text? Which ones, what would you like to do? Or would you like to do a weekend or evening course? Why not? So just going back to Gertrude Mauskowicz's comment there about how every lesson should start with a student. For me, every lesson should also end with the student. So we get them to link their own thoughts, their own ideas to the topic at the beginning of the lesson, but we bring it full circle. We bring it back at the end of the lesson as well. So on that note, a quick question for you guys. Having a look here at the different courses, which one would you most like to do? Just to let me know a little bit more about you guys. Trying to make connections here with you. So which of these courses would you like to do most of all? Bread making, something like Italy, writing course, Keep Fit course, crafty creations, digital media, dance around the world. Which would you do most of all? Don't worry about reading all the text. We haven't got time. But just from the title, which one would you most like to do? And it's gone for A, B, and G. Bread making, Taste of Italy, and digital media. Interesting. Katja's gone for C, writing course. I don't know why for me. I think I'd quite fancy to do the dance around the world, learning different dances. I'm terrible at dancing, but I think it'd be quite interesting to learn to do different dances. Hannah's gone for B and G. Who's gone for H? Come on, Tim and Flo, what would you do? Deanna, which ones would you choose? Put you on the spot there. Tim's going to do dancing with me. Flo's gone for D, on the move, bit of keep fit action. Okay, nice. Okay. So it's all about making those connections to self at the beginning and the end of the lesson.
Sounds nice.
Oh, I think I can hit, Fleur, I think you put your mic on. I know why it's not working. There we go. Another example here, this one's lessons all about music. Again, we start with the students. You know, what instruments do you know in English? So again, that's linking to prior knowledge. Can you play instruments? About you. What kind of music do you listen to? About them. And again, at the end, what's your favorite kind of music? What kind of music do you dislike? Start with self, end with self. And all the time we're learning more about the students. And actually what you could then do as a follow-up to that, because obviously in class, they're just talking in a small group or they're talking in pairs. Something I like to do, I like to have a class online notice board, so to speak. So I'm a big fan of using Padlet, where I can take an idea or a discussion in the class. So in this case, what's your favorite kind of music? And I can turn it into something more offline or as part of homework. So here I got my colleagues so I could learn more about them to tell me their favorite albums, their favorite artists and their favorite albums. And then post it onto a Padlet notice board. And it was just really nice to sort of, I learned a lot about my colleagues from the type of music that they liked in this case. So it's a case of, you know, not just doing it in class, but taking it outside of class and making those connections as well. And maybe they find they've got something in common with somebody who they didn't think they had something in common with. So again, it's building those relationships that we talked about at the start about connections to each other. Same with the grammar. You know, we're looking at a couple of reading lessons there, but again, the grammar, we're talking about themselves and using that grammar to talk about themselves as well. So working pairs answer these questions using have done. So when did you last have your eyes tested, etc. We're learning more about each other. Same for vocabulary. So whichever lesson we're doing, we need to personalize that language. It's absolutely vital. And again, I'm a big fan of bringing in my students' phones to these kind of tasks because we can use them for different grammar points, really. So, for example, we have a lesson here all about the present continuous. So we could get them to open their phones up and say, okay, talk about the photos on your phone and what you are doing or what the people are doing. So in this photo, I'm doing whatever. In this photo, this person is doing whatever. And again, students love it because it's talking about their phones, their lives, or using their phones, talking about their lives. Similarly to past tenses, I get students we've been studying the past tense, and I say to them, okay, over the weekend or next week, I want you to take photos of what you did at the weekend. And then on Monday, you're going to take your phones out and you're going to tell each other what you did at the weekend. So at the weekend, I did this, 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 and this. Or I had my haircut, I went ice skating. I went to my friend's house and we made cookies. I played table tennis, whatever it might be. This also works for the past continuous. It takes a little bit more setting up. So I set times to my students. I say, okay, I want you to take photos at 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. Set alarms on your phones. And when your alarm goes off, take a photo. Then you come into class the next time and say, okay, take your phones out, tell each other what you were doing at 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and so on. So at 10 o'clock, I was eating pizza. I know it was early in the day, whatever. Something else we can do. And then also talking about future plans, get them to take their diaries, get their phones out, get the calendars out. What are you doing? I'm meeting my friends. I'm going to the doctors. I'm flying wherever. I'm doing whatever it might be. Okay. But it's linking the grammar, the vocabulary, whatever it is, to their lives. Personalization is vital. And as John Hughes, one of our authors, says, it can create a positive learning environment for the learners and for the teacher. We should always try to personalize any new language to make it relevant to the learner. So just bear that in mind. Whatever it is you're doing in class, think about how can I start the lesson with my student? How can I end it with my student? Whether it's a reading, listening, writing, grammar, vocabulary lesson, think about that. Okay, I've got 3 minutes. I apologize. Last one, really quickly, connect to the wider world, the real world that we are living in. And this is part of what the CEFR says we should be doing as learning a language. You know, learning language and overall teaching goals should be to achieve a wider and deeper understanding of the ways of life and forms and thoughts of other people and of their cultural heritage. So English is the lingua franca of the world. Therefore, we should be teaching the world, bringing that into the classroom as much as possible. And as I'm sure you're all aware, National Geographic Learning has content from all around the world, whether that's North America, South America, Africa, Europe, Asia, Australasia. It gets covered. And these are all example lessons from New Close-Up. Just have a sort of closer look as well. Lessons on festivals from around the world. Forest bathing, whatever that might be. Green cities in Korea. The zebras of La Paz, living underground. Sapeurs and sapeuses of Kinshasa. Secrets of long life. There are lots of texts from around the world, bringing that real world into the classroom. And in doing so, we're bringing the world of the classroom to life. Lots of video content as well. Taste of India, Cambodia. Okay, so looking at those really quickly, how does that make you feel? Do you feel excited? Do you feel engaged? Do you feel curious? This is what real world content can do. Culture, real world content is a very powerful hook in the classroom. It can heighten the interest and motivation of your students. In the prism of culture, language classes instantly become exciting educational experiences. Tell me in the chat box, do you want your classrooms to be exciting educational experiences? I'm expecting lots of yeses here. I can hear you saying, yes, absolutely we do. Bringing real world culture content into the classroom absolutely does that. And the last thing I want to mention connected to this, and this idea of bringing global content is connecting it to global issues. The UN Sustainable Development Goals. These are issues, problems that we have to solve, or at least our students will have to solve in the future. So it can be really motivating to bring these sustainable development goals into the classroom because they are totally reflective of what we do or what our students or what education should be about as a whole. We are educating them for the future. And to do that, they need to know about the issues, the problems that we are facing right now. And, you know, from surveys and research I've read, students actually really enjoy learning about these things because they understand the importance of them. So bringing them into the classroom as much as you can do. Okay, my time is up. I'm on the hour. Just to recap really quickly though, try to make language learning as engaging, memorable, and effective as possible by making connections to each other, students and teacher, connecting to their prior learning, connecting it to themselves as much as possible, and ultimately connecting it to the world. So I know we've got a couple more talks coming up, but take some time later today to reflect. Looking ahead, how will you incorporate more connections into your classrooms to create a more effective, more efficient language learning environment? Okay, that is me done. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to hand over to, I think it is Deanna that we have now, right? Or we have a little break. I can't remember the schedule, Tim.
No, there's no break. We're going to go over to Deanna. But Alex, thank you very much for such a wonderful talk. Very practical as well. I love the idea of mutual respect and praising each other as students. And also I think student feedback is, student to student feedback is extremely important. So some great tips in there. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you to all of you. Deanna,
Diana, I thank you, Diana, for joining us again. So just to follow on from what Alex said, I see Diana here. I think she's going to give an absolutely fantastic talk, and I wonder what kind of hacks for teens she's going to talk about. So Diana, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Tim, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Just a second. My computer is going crazy. I need a second to adjust everything. So, dear colleagues, dear teachers, I'm very happy to be with you here today as a speaker, not only as a presenter. And today I would like to share one of my favorite topic, which is called project work. Actually, this is what I've been doing with my students for ages, and I faced lots of difficulties, some inspiration there was, so it's not such an easy way of conducting the lesson, but anyway, the outcome that I see, the students proud of what they have done is really great. And that is why I decided to share some of the ideas with you, what I did in order to hack project work with teens. And also another source of inspiration was the new series from National Geographic Learning, New Close Up, which has lots of projects on its pages, and they are really interesting. I guess you will see that in a few minutes. So I think we can start. And so the projects overall. I'm going to share some words with you, and please write your associations, how they are connected to the project work. So the first one is individuality. Any connections? Team, yeah. Child focus, good, creativity. Yeah, you're right, your associations, great, super. Yeah, you're right, and actually lots of them I also have on my list. And if to talk about individuality, why do you think I include this word when talking about projects? Funny moments. Oh yeah, lots of things to remember. So actually, projects are something that helps students show their individuality, right? They do some activities during the, thank you, Alex, they can find their own way, working at own pace, own imaginations. Right, thank you. I agree with you here. They really contribution, right? People can contribute to together's work. And it's the way for students to show themselves, who they are, what they like, what they want to be. And you can see it because they have totally different outcomes. Another one is application. For me, I was investigated the topic of projects a lot, and actually it's very important that the project has the product that that can be used in real life in some way for students to use it outdoor, out of the classroom, show their first-hand experience. That's right. Great. Lots of associations you have, dear colleagues. It's wonderful. And of course, some other words that I also associate with projects: communication. In order to do the project, to finish it, you have to communicate. And also teens, they learn how to communicate. They have lots of different ideas. They can share it using effectively the learner skills. You're right. right? They have to deal on something, they have to decide, they have to make some discussion and so on and so forth. Another thing is creativity. I think here you will agree with me, right? The project's actually one of the benefits that students can use their creativity and develop it as well, even if they think they are not as creative as they would like to be. Collaboration, you've been mentioned it lots of times, right? So students have to work together. Not only one student does the project, the team does it. So the teamwork, collaboration is important. And critical thinking. The right projects are the project that help students not only create something, but also to think about that, maybe to analyze something or to make some conclusion, to summarize. So this thing can help students to develop their critical thinking skills in a natural way. Natasha is asking about self-assessment. It's one of the ways for students, and I'm going to mention it a bit later in my talk. Inspired by the projects from New Close Up, I just would like to share with you some of them. You can see 2 different projects, even 4 different projects for different levels. But the very important thing here is that actually students have a choice. I would recommend doing that when you plan any project, is to give students this feeling of choice, that they're not told to do something. They can decide what they like, what they are more interested in, what is easier for them, or maybe more interesting and more engaging. And all those projects, they have some real outcome that is very important. So, and for myself, when I plan the project with the students, I think of some things that help make the projects good. So they are close to life, something that students can use in their everyday life, something that is close to their lives, right? Like here we have examples, how people making friends in new situations. This is something that we always have, especially teens when they visit different clubs, or they travel with their parents, or they just go outside, or maybe play some games on the network and they need to meet people. Anyway, they meet new people. So this is something from their life, right? Make a presentation, how to make a friend, the same thing. So making new friends is always something that happens in our lives. Projects for more adult students, like prepare a plan to help limit the screen time. For some students, it may be a challenge even to think of that, right? But for some students, maybe they can understand that they need this in order to complete their exams better, or because their parents often tell them about that. So it's something that they really hear every day, at least once a day, I would say. Something that you want to change in your daily life. So it's also the, teens, if we're talking about B1+, it's about the 10th grade teens, so they are about 15 years old. And this is the age when actually students start thinking of their future, what they want to be. And doing these projects really can help them become more aware of who they are. Good projects also should have a clear product, and students should know about that. So if it is a game, so we have a product, a game, we can even discuss with students that it can be active game, or maybe a board game, right? So we give students what actually we expect them to do. Presentation, again, it's a presentation for the class. So you are going to talk to your classmates. So think about what they want to hear from you. Prepare a plan. So the plan is like a list of something, right? So it has students understand what we want from them. And good projects help express yourself. We have, so everyone will understand this project in their own way, and they will prepare very interesting things, I would say. And also they have a choice. And again, I want to stress it, that they wouldn't want to choose something that is closer to them. Someone may want to work alone or in a pair in order to prepare a presentation. But for others, preparing a board game or maybe some active game would be real pleasure, and they will be really engaged, even if they are not engaged in your lessons. But I know when talking to teachers and from the practice that sometimes we can avoid doing projects. I have here some ideas, like students are not involved. Yeah, you give them the task, but they don't want to do it. It can turn into a real mess. I know that some teachers say about that, oh, I don't want to do that because then they will talk on their own things. They want to use L2, they will use L1 only, and I can't control this, and they won't really bring their projects at school then, so no. Or for some teachers, evaluation may be difficult. How to evaluate the project? What should I focus on? But while I am continue talking, share your ideas. What can stop you? What problems you may find? What obstacles can you meet during the project lesson? And but I would like to consider those 3 obstacles and to share what can happen. So the first and one thing that is, I think, true for not project work all in general is planning. As Dale Carnegie said, an hour of planning can save you 10 hours of doing. So if we plan the project appropriately and if we understand the stages of it, then our students will also follow our lead and they will actually work more productively, they will be more effective, and they will complete this project, and everyone would be happy about that. Yeah. Students are not involved. So even before doing the project, I should think of something like why my students are not involved. They are not interested. The topic is not interesting for them. They don't understand why they need to do it. They don't care. Yeah, it can be different ideas. Some students like to do the projects alone, don't want to work in a team. Yeah, Stella, you're right. It also can be a case. So the student is not as sociable as others, and he prefers to work alone. And as you have noticed, here we have a choice for such students. I create a presentation, so why not? But there's also one trick that helped me to work with such students, but it's going to be a bit later. So personalize the task. At least we can say that let's prepare a game for maybe next week. We are going to have a lesson with not only with your group, but with other groups. So we will have a mixed lesson. And can you imagine, there will be new children. They may feel not so confident. Let's think of a game that helps us. So you give them something that they really would use after that. Before the project, it's also important, and Alex have mentioned that here, activate schemata. So the same is here. We can talk about them. What problems you have? Is it has it all ever happened to you? What would you like to change, right? When we talk about it, so we move them that here is some problem and let's find a solution to it. Like and by this, I move into my second point, set the problem. It also can help students become more curious, like, do you want to check if the game can help people be more confident in a group? Yeah, or just games make people more confident. Let's check if it is true or false. So you give them some statement, and by doing the project, they can do that. And also for students, it can be difficult to come up with the ideas. That is truth. So they have their lives, they have different things at school, and here you with your project. So you just help them. Let's think what kind of a game we can prepare. What is your favorite game? Which one would you like to change? Yeah, what games do you like to play? So you're asking these personalized questions. We create a bank of ideas, and then you will tell. So now choose the game that you like the most, and now you just prepare the rules. So students will get more involved because you made this 5-minute talk, 5-minute warm up, and it will help them and understand why they're doing this, because there is a problem, because teacher made them interested. It can turn into a real mess. Here, I would suggest, and it always works, that as a teacher, or even better, students assign among their groups roles for each member. And as for me, I usually prepared a short description of what I would like what each role means. What roles can be? Someone can write down all the ideas. Some students can check if everything is according to the task. Some students can do some artwork, even not 1, 2 students. Other students can be responsible for grammar in the project, for proper grammar. Some students can even be involved in just taking photos or making a video of how the others make the project. Then you can analyze this video, for example. So everyone should know what is their part. The same, and when you know that, okay, I'm responsible only for this part, it's much easier for a teen rather than, oh, I need to do the project. How do I start? What do I do? Another thing is the stages of the project. Here we have a very nice description. And when students are aware of project work, when they understand, actually for them it's not a problem. But sometimes, even when you just start making the project, spend some time and prepare some instruction. I'm going to show you a checklist. Probably it's a bit long, but you can make it shorter, or make it shorter project by project. So by the end of the year, actually they won't need it, because they understand that if you want to eat an elephant, you should split it into the parts. So like here, as first they brainstorm ideas, then they choose, then they vote, then they start doing the project. They write down instructions, they think of a design, and for each, for example, for each stage, there can be one person who is responsible for it. You can ask them to write down who will be responsible for what, so they know their roles, they know their stages, and they move. And for them, it's much easier. And they feel safer. Even if they're afraid, they have very limited responsibility. And a clear product of what you would like to see. If it is appropriate, you can present it. You can find something on the internet. You can just give students the idea. So I need a presentation that has 5 slides. Yeah, so it's clear. It should have your words and some pictures, probably, right? Or I would like to have a board game, so prepare the cards for the class. So students need to understand exactly what product you assign. And evaluation. Here is a very nice chance to start self-assessment with your students. So you can ask them to, you can assign different rubrics and students and give them before the project. It can be combined with a stage actually. So they can see what actually would be assessed. Like players understand my instruction. They can check after that. Yes, no, it's quite visible. At least 3 people in my class think the design is good. Yeah, it's something that they can actually feel. I have used imperatives in instructions. Imagine it was a grammar topic of the unit. I have used 5 or more words from the unit, so they can count. So these are very simple things for students to assess themselves. And also it's a good help for a teacher, the same, right? So there were some tips that I've been using with my students when we're doing the project. And one more final look at the page from where I took this project. So it was taken from New Close Up A2 level. And as you can see, this is a part of a lesson that we call Live Well, Study Well. So students, actually, they discussed something about friendship, something about making friends, how to be yourself is important. And after that, they are told to make the project. So it's not just something out of the blue. The lesson gradually leads them to that. And it helps to warm up students. They can come up with the idea. So when they move to the project, they would actually understand what they need to talk about. And it's also one important thing that we have the context. And useful language. It's also important for students to practice, to point out, to check if they've been using it. The examples were taken from New Close Up, from New Close Up, which is already in Ukraine. So by visiting Linguist.ua or contact your manager, your sales manager in Linguist, you can order the book and see if it is good for your students, if you can use it. I would like to thank you for your attention. If you have any question, I will be happy to answer it. And again, thank you very much for your attention.
Diana, thank you ever so much. There were some really great practical ideas in there from New Close Up. I love the idea of integrating project work into the classroom. And I think the Live Well, Study Well, lessons throughout New Close Up are a really great addition to the new, to the new edition, to Close Up 3rd edition. So thank you ever so much for that. Does anybody have any questions for Diana at all? Please feel free to write them into the Q&A box rather than the chat box if you have any specific questions for Diana. Diana, I think you must have covered everything that everybody wants to know.
Yeah.
But thank you ever so much. So we're going to have a very short break now for around 5 minutes. And we'll be back shortly with Flo, who's going to give a talk, and Diana. So we just once again, Diana, we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
In your next challenge at Linguist. We're delighted you're staying at Linguist. But as I said, thank you ever so much for everything you've done over the last few years. And we look forward to seeing Irina on these webinars as well. And you've been a fantastic person to work with. So thank you very much, Diana.
Thank you.
So guys, if you want to go off and get a quick drink or use the toilet, please do now. It's probably a little bit early for a glass of wine or a beer, but who am I to speak? I can see, Flo, it's not too early for you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to leave you to it, and I'm intrigued by your talk. So I'm looking forward to hearing it myself, as I'm sure everybody is. So thank you very much.
Okay, no, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, fantastic. Let me just share my screen and sort out my slides. Okay, 1 minute. There we go. Okay, is that right?
No,
yeah,
you need to. Oh, there we go. Yeah,
there we go. Okay, fabulous. Thank you. Great. So obviously going to keep talking about New Close Up, but now going to look at teenagers, who they are, what they're like, and how we can help them both in the classroom and outside of the classroom to make the most of their English language learning opportunities, etc. So without further ado, okay, I have a question for you. So like Alex before, and Deanna, I'd like you to get involved if you can. And first of all, a question: what are teenagers like? Any adjectives that come to mind when you think of a teenager or teenagers? Okay. If you can pop them into chat, that would be great. Thanks, dear. Moody, naughty. Okay, moody again. Okay. Independent, nice. Okay. Okay. Independent spirit. So yeah, sort of free-spirited, rebellious, grumpy. Well, nice smiley face, Stella. Good. Are they happy? Sometimes. Motivated. Thank you, Dina. Yeah, they can be, absolutely. Yeah, good. Mischievous. I like that word. That's nice. Okay. Talented, active, engaged, busy, brilliant. Okay, now this is lovely to see. There's a nice mixture there. There's some of the sort of typical ones that are a bit more negative, perhaps, sort of moody we had, but also then TikTok, okay, but also some more positive ones as well, creative, independent, all very nice, great. Now, next question, okay, what's it like to teach them? So I'm assuming at least some of you teach teenagers already. If you don't, imagine. Okay, what's it like to teach them? Okay. Can be challenging, yes, but lots of fun. Fantastic, good. I feel the same, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, daily challenges, yeah, challenging. This is a key word often, isn't it? And that can be with teaching any age group as well, any class. Interesting, Anna, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Okay, a real challenge, but always interesting. Very nice. I agree. Brilliant. Good. Tricky. Good word. Okay. Lovely. Lovely. Okay. Fantastic. So I think one thing I feel we're often a bit mean to teenagers. We do quite often think of those negative adjectives first, you know, thinking of them as being a bit moody, a bit naughty, mischievous. We kind of forget the positive ones. Okay. And I've been doing a bit of research for this talk. I was reading some articles from neuroscientists and educational psychologists. I'm not going to share everything with you, don't worry. I didn't understand it all either, is another reason why I won't do that. But I found out a few interesting things. And we're therefore going to talk about some common misconceptions we might have of teenagers, kind of linking to those negative adjectives that spring to mind first of all. So one of them, I don't think we actually said it, but sometimes they might appear disinterested. Okay, but this is the thing, they might appear that way, but actually something else is going on. There is a reason why this is happening. Okay. Some people would say they're lazy, but again, that's actually not quite right. There's a reason why they might seem like that. Occasionally they might be, but so can we, right? We can sometimes be lazy, but there's something else going on there. Okay. We might sometimes feel like they always need to be told what to do at all times. Okay. But again, maybe not actually. Okay. And we might think as well that they can only cope with very nice, simple, easy tasks. Again, maybe not. We'll have a look. We'll discuss it. Then something that's perhaps generally true, and I feel a bit bad saying this just about teenagers because we're all guilty of it, but being glued to their phones. Okay, but the thing is, I think, a lot of us as adults are the same. So we'll talk about how actually we can utilize phones both in the classroom and outside of the classroom to help our learners on their learning journey. Okay, so starting off with teenagers are disinterested. I put a big red cross because I've been doing some reading, as I say, and actually, if they appear disinterested, it can be because they're actually suffering from low self-esteem. So, we were teenagers, we all were teenagers, perhaps not even that long ago. And hopefully, we can all remember, or maybe you don't want to, but it's quite a difficult time. It's quite a stressful time as well. We're kind of questioning who we are, who we want to be, where we want to go, what we want to do. And we can start sort of questioning our own abilities sometimes, linking in here with then sort of feeling maybe not very confident in ourselves. And say this can then appear as though students sort of disinterested, but actually they're just kind of concerned about what's going on and where they're going in life. Okay. Also, we might not be appealing to their learning style. So in ELT, we've discussed learning styles quite a lot over the years. In recent years, there's also been debates about, well, do they even exist or not? There's two camps. Some say they do, some say they don't. I'm with the they do exist camp. So we're going to talk a little about that. But an interesting thing as well is that when we're teenagers, our brains are still developing. So that means our learning styles are still developing as well. And that can continue into our 20s. Okay, so anyway, bearing this in mind, what can we do as teachers? Okay, so you've seen these Live Well, Study Well lessons a couple of times already. I'm going to show you a few more just quickly now. So these are linked to social and emotional learning, which isn't new, but is something that we're focusing on more these days. And I think that's really good, because considering everything that's going on in the world, I think it's really important to give students the opportunity to develop these sort of social and emotional skills, and 21st century skills come in here as well. So at the end of every other unit in New Close Up, you'll see these Live Well, Study Well lessons. Okay, and we have one here that we actually saw earlier in Alex's talk about teamwork. And what I just want to focus on quickly are these Mind Your Mind boxes, which give some nice practical tips and tricks for how to try and overcome these common issues that our teenagers, our students might be having. Now, I think this is really nice. So looking at this one here, having confidence in yourself. Teenagers can sometimes feel like they are the only ones struggling with something or having a certain problem. Okay, even we sometimes feel like this, don't we? I think, we look around and everybody else seems to be doing life better than us. They seem to have it all worked out. But actually, we're all sort of stumbling around in the darkness a little bit, trying to work out who we are and what we're doing. But as adults, we're a bit more aware. At the back of our minds, we know it can't just be us that's not very good at this, or doesn't quite know what they're doing here or with that. But with teenagers, it's quite useful to kind of highlight to them that they're not alone. If they don't feel very confident, other people don't feel very confident too. So having and then being able to see in a book that this is a topic will kind of highlight that to them. We have another lesson here on staying motivated. So we said before, the teenage years are difficult ones for many, many reasons. Quite often it's a time when learners are having to prepare for a number of exams. Perhaps they're considering where they're going next in terms of further education, higher education, the world of work. So it's really helpful to provide them with some tips to keep them motivated. And then we have one here, which I wish was around when I was a teenager, for tips on using social media and also ways to stay positive, keep positive, which I think is something that's, really we should try our best to do when we can. A really good tip that I'm trying to take from this is not to look at social media first thing in the morning and last thing at night, because it means I do start the day going grr and finish the day going grr, which isn't a great way to live. But yeah, so some really, really useful tips and advice, both for our learners, but also for us as well, or certainly for me. Anyway, Now, something else to consider with social and emotional learning. This is actually an idea I stole shamelessly from Kath Stannett, who's the author of New Close Up. I was lucky enough to travel with her recently, and she had this idea in one of her talks. So basically, it sounds a bit strange, but bringing problems into the classroom. So by that, I mean, in groups, put your students into groups and get them to brainstorm some typical problems that teenagers have. So the great thing here is that they can bring in a problem that they're actually dealing with, but because we're just brainstorming typical problems, no one will actually know whether they're dealing with it or not. So they don't have to feel shy about bringing in something that actually is true for them. Then as a group, they can choose which of the problems they want to focus on and create some small steps that could be taken to help address that problem or help to cope with that problem. It could be that you, the teacher, allocate the particular problem you want the groups to focus on as well. Okay, and here we are talking small steps, so it won't necessarily solve whatever the problem is, but just sort of things to consider, like who to speak to about whatever it may be, what sort of websites people could go to find out information about whatever it might be. Okay, and then mix the students up so then they can all share the problem that they were discussing and the sort of solutions that they came up with, or as I say, those small steps really that they came up with, and possibly even more ideas will come out when they're sharing in their new group as well. Okay, and we have a famous sort of saying there at the bottom. So a problem shared is a problem halved. You probably have something similar, but yeah, being able to talk about some of the difficulties that our learners can face in these years, doing the talking can actually help our learners a lot with how they're feeling and what they're dealing with. Now, we mentioned learning styles before as well. And as I said, I know, some people don't really believe in them. I do. So we're going to look at them. And here in one of our Live Well, Study Well lessons, we actually have a short quiz to find out what our learning style is. So I'd like you to do it, if you don't mind. And obviously, only if you're happy to share, please share in the chat. So also, if you already have done something like this before, consider what you got, what type of learner you were, and then we can see whether you're still that type of learner, or maybe things have changed a little bit. So first of all, so number one, okay, you need directions to get to a museum. Which of these three options do you prefer? So would you prefer someone to tell you the directions, option A? Would you prefer them to write, so option B, or draw a map? Okay, great. So we've got a C come in there, an A. Yeah, please feel free to share and then carry on with the other ones as well. So number two, if you're learning how to make better photos, what do you prefer? And the same again with three, finding out information for a presentation. Okay. So interesting. So quite a few A's. And then, okay, brilliant. A couple of C's there. Lovely. Okay, 1A, 2A, 3B. Thanks, Svetlana. Okay, a bit of a mixture. Good. I think I did C for all of them, actually. I was very C. Great. 2, B, C. Okay, a bit of both, maybe sometimes 2C. Okay, quite a few C's as well. Not so many B's actually. Lots of A's and C's. That's interesting. Great. Okay. Lovely. Thank you. So let me share the results here. Okay. So have a quick look. Find which you came out as. Any surprises? Maybe changes from what you've been in the past. Obviously, there are a lot of these available online as well, and some quite big meaty ones too. If you maybe if you haven't done them before and are interested, or you want to do them with your class, you can find them elsewhere as well. Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, I came out as C, so I do agree with that. I think, you know, I do feel like I'm more of a visual learner. I think it kind of reflects how I learned as well. So quite, you know, typically here in the UK, the way we're taught to kind of reflects sort of the visual learning style, whereas I spent a bit of time teaching in China, and quite a few of the students then would come out as auditory learners. And it's always this interesting debate of, because in China a lot of the learning is done rote learning, so listening and repeating. So there's sort of that debate of the chicken or the egg, which came first. Do we teach our students in that way because that is what they are, that's their learning styles, or have our students sort of adjusted to the way that they're being taught? So there's always that sort of debate. If you're interested in learning styles, there's loads of information out there. I won't bore you with too much, but I do think it can be really useful to do something like this with your learners, because it might be that you have a learner that is struggling with something and they don't really know why. And what can happen is they think they're being stupid or something like that, which obviously isn't the case. It might just be that we haven't taken into account kind of how they learn. So this all became kind of quite clear to me when I had a trainee teacher, actually, who sometimes just, it took him a long time to work out what he was meant to be doing in tasks, in seminars that we were delivering. And then we had a session on learning styles, and he came out as a very auditory learner. And basically we realized there were times when we weren't delivering full instructions orally. We were just relying on written instructions. And so it was taking him a bit longer to process what he was required to do. But as soon as we then realized that was what was going on, we could make some nice, quick, simple adaptations to ensure that, yeah, we were catering to his needs as well as everybody else's. Okay, and say it's really useful for our learners to understand that too. So they're not sort of thinking, what's wrong with me? Well, no, it's fine. You're just an auditory learner. Great. Okay, lovely. So moving on to the next misconception. Okay, teenagers are lazy. Again, big cross. Now this I found quite interesting when I was doing my reading. So biology, and not just human biology. So our sleeping patterns do shift during adolescence, during our teenage years as well. And it's not just in humans, but animals as well. And basically what happens is when we're a teenager, our need to sleep is delayed. So even though we kind of should be going to sleep at 10 o'clock, we're not feeling we need to go to sleep until, say, midnight, 1 in the morning, which is known as sleep phase delay. And the problem here is that our teenagers still should be getting 9 hours of sleep per night to ensure they're sort of, developing as they should, and, being able to then focus fully the following day. So we've got a bit of a problem. What can we do? Now, the best answer to this would be letting teenagers start school later. Okay, so ideally, studies have shown our teenagers shouldn't really be starting school till like midday or 1 in the afternoon. But unfortunately, I don't think any of us here today necessarily have the power to change that. So we need to find other ways of helping our learners with this. So one solution, or one, option at any rate, is trying to raise energy levels in the classroom. Try and draw those learners in, kind of wake them up, get them going, get them ready for the lessons. So just a quick question for you. How do you raise energy levels in your classroom? What sort of things do you do? What do you bring into the lessons to get those energy levels up? There's no wrong answers, really, I wouldn't say. So anything you do at all is great. Oh, great. Mingle. Thank you, Mingles. Great. Oh, nice jokes. Good. Games. Fantastic. Group work. Sorry, just going back up. Lovely. Oh, star jumps, Alex. Yes. Well, it's true. It's true. Absolutely. Great. Unexpected tasks. That's nice. So yeah, a bit of kind of variety, competition. Lovely. videos, games. Wow, great, great, fantastic. Yeah, so there's lots of techniques you already use, and that's brilliant. Having a motivated teacher, definitely, good. Okay, so like, yeah, kind of a guessing game there. Yeah, good, lovely. Okay, so a few things that I tend to use, and you've mentioned, I think, all of them already. So brilliant. Is movement, bringing in some movement. So I mean, Alex there mentioned mingle, so that's bringing in some movement. And there are lots of games that we can do with this as well. And we'll look at a few in a moment. Competition was certainly there, definitely. And again, we're going to look at that. So that's great. Pair and group work, I know that was mentioned as well. So rather than students just working alone or even just working in pairs, sort of, you know, shaking things up a little bit. Brilliant. And variety, which was mentioned too. So routine can be useful in the classroom, certainly, but at the same time, bring in some variety. And then finally, a snappy pace. So we're going to look at the first four and some examples of these. A snappy pace, you can't really do kind of examples of that. All I would say there really is don't rush everything to the point where everybody's completely stressed and don't know what they're doing and then just give up. But at the same time, don't let things go on too long, because that's when, you know, students can start getting a little bit bored. So yeah, trying to keep it snappy. And this is tough because it has to vary sometimes from day to day, because on some days we can cope with this, on other days we can't. So it keeps us on our toes as teachers, but it's something, you know, to try and bear in mind when possible. So, next slide. So we're going to look first at activities for building in movement and competition as well. Now, these are very simple activities and activities that you have probably met before. You may use regularly, but I just thought it would be nice to sometimes remind you of some activities, because as teachers, there are so many options out there. We can kind of forget about activities because we've gone on to do something else instead. So a simple activity, ball throw. So the blue box there is your whiteboard. Pop in to the boxes. So have 4 boxes, sort of topics, lexical set topics such as these. So let's say these are the ones that we've been studying over the last week or few weeks, and we want to revise them with our learners. Put the learners into 2 groups. So you've got team A and team B. And give each team a ball, ideally a soft one, okay? And they have to line up with the first person in each team facing the board, and then their teammates are behind them, okay, like a queue. And then you, the teacher, you could get a student to do it as well, but I would tend to do it as me, the teacher. I will say a word for one of these topics. So for example, hockey. And then the students have to throw their ball at, hopefully in this case, they'll throw it at sports, the box for sports. And the student who does that the fastest gets a point for their team. They then pick up the ball that they've thrown and pass it to the next person. They go to the back of the queue. So hopefully, depending on class sizes and time, they'll get to do this a few times. And obviously, the team with the most points by the end is the winner, hence the competition idea as well there. And you can be a bit mean if you want to be, and say things like, given the options we have here, you could have raincoat, just to kind of keep learners on their toes a little bit more. So very, very simple. And a great way to review lexical sets. Good for that. Can also be used for some revision of pronunciation, which we'll look at next as a very similar activity that I do. And also, if you want to increase or decrease the level of challenge, you can obviously, you don't have to have 4 boxes there. You could just have 2 if we're at sort of the beginning of the year, and they've only kind of been studying a couple of things at that point, something like that. Great. Okay, so something that's going to look very, very similar. Board slap, though, this time. So here we're going to focus on pronunciation, but you could obviously do this with vocab as well. The focus here is on the vowel sounds. Okay, so we've got I, and O. Okay, they're the vowel sounds, as you know. And same again, 2 teams, team A, team B, line up. Okay, and this time, instead of throwing a ball, they're going to slap the board, either with their hand, or I like to do it with fly swatters. I stole this idea from a school I was working at in Vietnam, and we always had to have fly swatters. Lots of mosquitoes. So yeah, if you've got them, great, they're really good. Bam, bam. Anyway, so you will say a word that has the same vowel sound in as one of these. So for example, fun, and hopefully the learners will slap some, because that has the same vowel sound. If you said kite, they will hopefully hit sight. Okay, so very simple, but just a great way to revise those vowel sounds. Oh, thanks, Stella. It is exciting, yes. Lovely. So yeah, great for revising sounds, particularly those vowel ones, because when you think about it in English, like the letter A, when we write it, that the sound can actually, there can be like 5 different sounds that letter can be when we're speaking. So you know, it is really useful to have these activities to compare and contrast with our learners. Okay, and obviously you could do the vocabulary option we saw before, like this. It's just, yeah, mosquito slappers instead of balls. That's fine. Going back to pronunciation, using it in that way, if your learners are familiar with phonemes, pop the phonemes in the boxes instead of the words, and they have to slap the correct phoneme. So it just depends if you're teaching them the phonemic script or not. Brilliant, brilliant. Glad you like it. Thank you. Great. And then something, again, very similar, but just slightly different. And I've done this one for grammar, but again, it's quite flexible. Here we have some irregular past simple verbs. Imagine the boxes are flashcards. So if you have irregular verb flashcards, great. You can also make your own reasonably easily. Pop them on the board. And then again, team A, team B, you will say the base form of the verb. So eat, for example, and then the learners have to grab the correct past simple irregular verb for the word that you said. And then at the end, instead of having points on the board like with the previous activities, the teams will count up how many flashcards or how many bits of paper they've got at the end. So just slightly different there. Okay, brilliant. Great. So in this sense, we're using it for irregular verbs, but obviously you could use it for vocabulary as well. So put on the board words, you read a simple definition or give some examples. Ideally, though, just, you know, things that are quite simple to portray. It's not going to take too long. And then they have to grab the word that you've just defined. Okay, fantastic. Great. To adapt it, so thinking about it with this particular activity, if you want to, you could have a mix of past simple and past participle verbs, and you could make them have to get both of them, or say, I want the past participle of whatever it might be, so eat, and then, you know, if they get ate, you have to put it back. That's not the right one. Okay. Brilliant. And yeah, just a quick recommendation, laminate your flashcards, because otherwise they really don't last long. Top tip from a teacher, do laminate, it's really useful. Fantastic. Good. And now another activity, I'm sure you've heard of these, or pretty sure. So running dictation, they're great. And this is one of the activities when I was teaching online during lockdown, I did really miss having this opportunity to use these. So very simply, you're just going to put a text, a short text. So even this is maybe a little bit long. You could get away with just that first paragraph, perhaps. It depends on time, to be honest, depends on your learners. Put the text around the room, or even in the corridor, not too far away, not down the street or something, but yeah, in the room, around the school, within reason. And then put learners into pairs. Okay, one will be the runner, and one will be the writer. It doesn't really matter. They're going to switch halfway through anyway. So whoever gets one, you know, at the beginning, it's fine. And then the runner, when you say go, must run to their text, read it, remember it, and report back to the writer what they have read. Okay, and the writer then has to write it down. Okay, and now they're not going to be able to remember the whole paragraph. That's not the point. Okay, they're going to have to try and remember sort of chunks of language, be it sentences or kind of clauses. Okay, and this is part of why it's useful as well. Yeah, good. Thank you. Fantastic. So in terms of why this is useful, so it's great because it practices all 4 language skills, because they're reading, they're speaking when they're telling the runner's telling the writer what they read, there's writing going on, but also listening as well, because the runner will tell the writer what they read and the writer is listening to them. So all 4 skills are there, which is brilliant, and which is quite rare, I'd say, really, with activities. It does encourage learners to remember chunks of language, which is how we store language in our brains. And it then down the line, eventually will help our learners with their fluency, because they've stored language in these useful chunks that they can sort of retrieve more easily when they're speaking, when they're writing. Okay. And then you can use it. Oh, brilliant. Going to try it on your online lesson. Fantastic. I'm not sure how you do it online. You have to let me know what you're going to do. I'm intrigued by that. That'd be great. Please, yeah, if you can let me know. That'd be great. And then, so yeah, and also you can use it to move into a reading or a language through a text lesson. So this can just be the start. So, as we say, we want to raise those energy levels at the beginning of the class, but we know we've got a reading lesson to do because, teenagers can't get out of doing what they need to do. But we can start with this, and then they go into, okay, now read the full text for gist and carry on as you would normally. A possible adaptation would be to get learners to switch roles a bit more often, adds a bit more challenge. It's a little bit more chaotic perhaps as well. Yeah, you can do that too. Fabulous. So that's that one. And then something else here, which is movement related, not so much competition. And sorry, just going back to running dictation, the competition there can come from whichever team gets the whole text down the quickest and kind of get some bonus points. That you can add some competition to that too. Anyway, gallery walk. Now, the idea here is that you'll do this in writing lessons. So learners write, say here we have a task where they're writing an article, okay, and then instead of learners then reading their article to their partner, which doesn't really reflect what we do with articles, does it? When we've written, say we write an article, I don't know if we all do, but say we did, we'd then expect somebody else to actually read it, wouldn't we? So we're trying to reflect that as best we can, reflect that reality here. So put what the learners have written around the classroom. So you're turning your classroom into a gallery, and learners will walk around and give them some sort of gist task, basically. So like the ones at the bottom here, so they have to walk around, read the text, in this case, the articles, and decide, okay, maybe which is your favorite, or which is the most interesting, which is the most similar to yours. You can decide what question you ask, or a couple of questions based on whatever the text type is, the content of the text. Okay, so yeah, they walk around like they're in a gallery. How lovely. So and this is great for encouraging learners to read each other's work, okay, which leads to greater idea sharing. Okay, so this is kind of in writing lessons, we should be aiming to finish writing lessons with a publishing stage where possible, and this is this here, having a gallery walk. Okay. And something else I sometimes do with this as well is encourage them not to put their names on their work. So part of the task is also to guess whose work it is. This can be quite nice, especially if you're getting them to write like a story or something. It can be quite interesting, especially if you've got a group that know each other reasonably well. They're kind of going, oh, I wonder, was that you? Could that have been you? That's quite nice. Okay, and then we mentioned before there online teaching. And it was interesting to see, obviously, a lot of you are still online, and we're seeing that a lot, absolutely. So I was trying to think, how do we add movement to the online classroom? Because I do think it's trickier. So I just came up with a few very sort of simple, basic ideas. You've probably got more as well. If you're happy to share any ideas, that would be fantastic. I'll just give you, I'm running out of time a little bit. So just sort of 30 seconds. How do you bring movement into the online classroom? Terrible at time management. Anything you do, any activities? You mentioned before that on running dictation online. I'm not sure how you do that. I'm just intrigued. Anything you do? It is a tough one, I think. It's when we first started teaching online, I really didn't have any ideas how to try and replicate that. Okay, Mentimeter activity, yes. Treasure hunt, find the nice, find things starting with a letter, definitely. Okay, possibly, yeah. Okay, good, great. Great, thank you. So I'm just going to share a few very simple ones of mine. So like Tim said, so a kind of a show and tell idea. So encouraging students to go and find, say, meaningful objects. So it could be, okay, find me something that relates to your childhood. Find me something that relates to your favorite hobby. Find me something that relates to a person who's important to you. Because they have to go off, find these things, and then show them to the class or just to their partner if they're working in breakout rooms. And it might be that you even then encourage the partner to sort of guess, well, what it is. Which is it? Is it related to childhood? Is it related to hobby? Okay, and why it's meaningful. What the story could be behind this, and that's another option as well. So have to find objects with a particular story. And also then we have kind of get to know you activities. So again, it can link to those meaningful objects. So, but a great sort of one for a first class with a new group. So find things, 3 things that tell us something about you and who you are. Okay, and it can be really interesting to see what they find. And then again, you could make it that their partner or partners have to kind of guess what it is and what the connection is. So we had in Alex's talk all about sort of these connections. So kind of bringing that back in. And you can also use it simply for things like revising nouns or adjectives. So you have to go away and find something fluffy or shiny or whatever it might be. Good. So we can also do things like, oh, here we go. Oh, yeah. Mime the adjective. And we could do it also like charades, however you want to call it. So with activities, but yeah, getting students to mime. So nervous, excited. So that can bring in some movement as well. Good to review those sort of things. And then also describe and draw activities. So drawing's not massively movement focused, but it is still bringing in movement. It's still something that if we talked about learning styles before, and we often will talk about kinesthetic learners, and drawing is part of that, to draw. So it could be that you have student A describes their view to student B, and student B has to draw it. And you can bring in some great sort of language revision things in here. So prepositions of place, for example, adjectives. So particularly say we're describing a person and we're talking about them having curly hair or being tall, for example. Then when we see what the student has drawn, we kind of get an idea of, okay, maybe they haven't quite understood what curly hair is or whatever it might be. Okay, so just simple ideas for maybe bringing in a little bit of movement to the online classroom. And I'm sure there are more that you're maybe already aware of and doing as well. Okay, fantastic. So in terms of pair work, group work and variety, I just want to mention pyramid discussions. I don't know if anyone's used these. I'm sure some of you will have heard of them. They kind of look like this. Nice useful graphic here. So learners often, maybe even alone first, have to make some sort of decision. and then they have to make the same decision as a pair with somebody else, and then that kind of grows and grows and builds as we go through. So in terms of how we could use one of these with New Close-Up, we've got this unit opener here. We're in this fantastic place in Argentina. Okay, and we could, so in this case, we'll give students a destination. So in this case, we could use the place here and give them a list of items they can take with them on a 3-day trip to this place, wherever it might be. Okay. First of all, they must decide on 5 items they will take. So it might be that the list you give them has 15 or 20 items. So, you know, knife, sleeping bag, sunscreen, things like that. But they can only take 5, and then after they've decided on their own, they must agree with their partner. So there's going to be quite a lot of negotiation going on. Well, I think we really need this because, okay. And then they can go into a group of 4. So they're still with their same original partner, but now there's another pair with them. And again, though, they can still only take 5 things. So again, they're going to have to negotiate, maybe find some compromises along the way. And then I recommend finishing with a whole class vote in the end of maybe, you know, the final sort of 2 or 4 groups. Okay, what are you taking? Let's now vote on which option we'll go for, because we're all going to this place together. Okay. So in terms of varieties with this, if you have a smaller class, you could also do it where you actually reduce the number of items. So rather than building up and up and up in terms of number of students, you know, that isn't always possible if we're teaching small groups. So you can initially let them, they can take 10 items, but then, okay, no, you can only take 5. So they're still going to have to negotiate and find compromises, but it lends itself to a smaller class size. And if you want to, you don't have to give them a list of things they choose from. Get them to brainstorm the list. So especially if you've been studying, say, vocabulary related to trips and holidays, so, you know, things like sunscreen, sunglasses, swimming trunks, whatever it might be, start off with them brainstorming, you know, reviewing those sort of items, and then, you know, they have to choose from that list on the board that they've created, you know, the 5 things that they'll take with them. So pyramid discussions are great for, you know, that variety, a mixture of pair work and group work, as long as you've got a big enough class size. And it really helps learners build confidence as well in what they're saying, and hopefully builds on accuracy and fluency as well, because there's going to be some repetition as they go through. Okay, because they're going to talk about some things with their first partner, and then those same things will re-emerge when they're discussing in a group of 4, for example. Okay, so that repetition is really helpful for confidence, fluency, and accuracy too. And then another option as well, and this also it links to movement that we were talking about before, but mingling. And I think Alex included that before. Great, yeah, brainstorming is always good, exactly. Yeah, bring in, you know, prior knowledge, as Alex talked about, right? So we can also do mingling, and I think it was Alex mentioned we've got these your ideas questions in New Close-Up. They're great for getting students talking, because students actually have to say something. They're not yes no questions, so they can't be lazy or disinterested here. They have to be involved. And basically, yeah, instead of them talking about these topics just with one partner, get them up, get them mingling around. Now, sometimes teachers can say mingling, it can get a bit sort of complicated, and you're trying to get them to change pairs, but they don't hear you or they ignore you. Really, they'll be ignoring you probably just because they can't hear you. So the way I control mingles, or attempt to anyway, is actually I play some music in the background, just instrumental music rather than music with lyrics, because the lyrics can be a bit confusing for learners. So put the music on in the background and tell them that when the music stops, they have to change partners. Okay. The other option, just very briefly turning off the lights as a cue to know, you know, to change partners, because often the absence of something, so in this case, noise or light, is more noticeable than if you just added another voice to everything else that's going on by saying, you know, change pairs. Okay. So my top tip with mingling there. So we started this section by talking about time and time management, which I'm very much not good at, but we can help our learners with this outside of the classroom. So we said we can't really do much about the day starting when it does, but we can encourage our learners to, here we go, to manage their time at the weekends and during the holidays, perhaps in a more conducive sort of way. So encourage them to reflect on when they work best. Okay, when do they notice they're taking things in more, for example? Okay, when do they notice they're finding tasks that little bit easier to do? Encourage them to create a timetable for when they should be studying and revising, especially if they've got an exam coming up. And encourage them to plan their break times, but also, you know, when doing this, consider when in the day they're doing it. So if they're planning to go see friends at 6 o'clock in the evening, but they've identified that as a time when actually they work best, maybe shifting that, okay, pushing that backwards or forwards so that they do dedicate a good, you know, a useful time for them to their studies. Okay, and they make the most of that time outside of the classroom. Okay, brilliant. Good. Okay, you're welcome. Fantastic. So we also mentioned about teenagers needing to be told what to do. Again, a nice big cross there. So numerous studies have actually shown that giving learners choice in the classroom increases engagement. Now, both Alex and Deanna very helpfully mentioned this before, so we will go through this quite quickly. But yeah, they also have a greater ownership and can take greater ownership of their learning when they're given a bit of a choice in terms of what they're doing. So what can we do? We give them choice, obviously. So yeah, and we've got a nice quote there, but yeah, basically giving them choice will help to keep them engaged. Okay, kind of gives them and that's really nice as well, a sense of empowerment over their learning. All right, so we've seen already, and I'll quickly show you them again with the project work in New Close-Up. There's always a choice of 2 options, which is fantastic. Occasionally, you might want to bring in choice that's not there in the course book already, but you know, quite simply, you can design your own activity. So say they're doing a lesson such as this one where they're reading about some festivals. So you've given the choice between, number 1, creating their own festival. Okay, making decisions about what it is, what's happening there. Or they could make a poster of a festival from their country. Okay, or they could go away and be doing some research and creating a presentation about a festival elsewhere. And you can also encourage them to think back to their learning style as well when making these sort of decisions too. So especially if you do some sort of questionnaire with them on that. And you can vary sort of the interaction patterns with these as well. So with number 1, you may well encourage them to do that in pairs or groups, so design this festival together. Okay, whereas the other ones might be more sort of solitary, independent work. And you can choose, you know, you've got a choice as well as a teacher. All right, fantastic. Okay, so I won't really go through these because we've seen them a couple of times, but they are fantastic, these projects in New Close-Up. You know, do have a look at them. You'll see some examples. So yeah, but just to show you again. Very briefly. Now, very quickly, teenagers can only cope with easy tasks. Nope, not true. Big red cross, apparently. Oh, good. You're speaking about celebrations with your students. Fantastic. Yeah, good. Thanks for sharing. It's lovely. So yeah, use those ideas. Anyway, teachers can only cope with easy tasks. Sorry, I get so distracted. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. And I think probably we can all maybe agree with this. When we've been studying, if you're, and even just with other life things as well, if there's not a challenge there, we kind of don't really get better at it, do we? It just kind of stays the same. And also, it might sound a bit strange, but yeah, experiencing this struggle or, you know, this challenge can actually make our learners happier and more focused. So what can we do? Now, I'll just briefly show you this. So this is actually related to a study done on rats with electric shocks. If you're interested, feel free to Google it. But basically what it found was that there is an area of best performance. So it's highlighting the fact that if we don't challenge people, our students, they'll become a bit bored and they won't really perform very well. There's not really that need, that motivation there. At the same time, though, we don't want to over-challenge them and lead them to, feeling incredibly stressed and anxious. So, it is a case of finding that balance and ideally ending up in that middle bit there, that area of best performance for our learners. Okay, very well. So in terms of adding challenge, one thing I just want to quickly talk about is critical thinking, one of our 21st century skills. And I think this is a key one that is so important at the moment. And we have a lesson here actually on critical thinking. So dealing with things like deep fakes and fake news, fake information. If any of you have access to BBC, there was a TV show, the second series just finished, called The Capture. It's got deep fakes in it. If you're interested, have a look if you can get it. Really good. Sorry, I diverged from my presentation. So anyway, with critical thinking, we're encouraging learners to reflect on the topics that they're reading about, finding out about, listening to. Encourage them to interrogate that information, question it, ask those questions, and identify the relevance. And again, maybe bringing connections here. What's it connected to? Who is the writer connected to, or what are they connected to? Okay, so this lesson here encourages that and builds those sort of skills, but you can also encourage your learners to do this outside of the classroom as well. So here we have some questions that you can encourage your learners to ask when they're reading online articles. So who wrote it, where is it published, when, etc. And 3 things to check out there. So the first link there, Factitious, that's sort of a game basically that you can play and your students can play. Check it first, make sure it's appropriate. But basically they have to decide if the news is fake or not. It's kind of like Tinder, because you have to swipe right or swipe left, depending if it's true or false for them. Have a look, quite nice. News literacy, lots of really nice tips there for kind of helping learners to interrogate information. And then there's BuzzFeed, a fake news quiz, not so suitable as it is for students, I wouldn't say, but you could get some ideas from that to maybe make a similar kind of idea, okay, of sort of fake news. Brilliant. Running out of time, I've run out of time. But also to add challenge, we do have exam tasks in New Close Up. So it is also helping learners prepare for exams. So exam tasks, they are challenging, but that's what they need. So they are in the book. But to find that balance, to try and avoid that anxiety, there are also really nice practical exam tips, both for students, but also for you, the teacher, in the teacher's book. So if you're not so familiar, say, with Cambridge exams, well, don't worry, we've got you. In the teacher's book, all the information you could possibly need is in there. Okay, just another example there and some more tips. Very, very finally, teenagers are glued to their phones, big tick. This research was actually done in the States, so it's not actually international, but I think we'll all agree that teenagers and adults, for that matter, do use our phones a lot. So what can we do? Oh, we can embrace it. So we've seen some of these mentioned already. I'll let you, if you're not familiar with any of them, I'll let you go and research them yourselves. But there are so many things that you can do with these in the classroom. So for example, quizzes you can make, but also you can encourage your students to make quizzes, maybe at the end of a unit, give each pair a particular thing to focus on, be it vocab or grammar. Okay, Padlet for Post-it, so helping with brainstorming and revising vocab, both in the classroom or at home as well. And word clouds when brainstorming, and I'm sure that was mentioned before as well, I think in Alex's talk. So yeah, lots of options there. So actually, embrace technology in the classroom, and particularly, the mobile phone. And very, very finally, we mentioned OLP before, and Tim mentioned it in the break. If you haven't found it yet, there is an app for OLP, which students can download to their phones or their tablets and then do their homework on it, even do some extra practice in the classroom if you want them to. Okay, and they can do work when they're offline, and then when they go back online, the answers that they gave will go through and will appear in their grade book. So if you haven't discovered this yet, oh, thanks, Irena, that's so kind of you. If you haven't discovered this yet, do have a look at it and tell your students all about it. Okay, fabulous. So any questions? Don't really have time, but if you do have questions, pop them in Q&A and I'll come back to you. There we go. Tim showed you that before. These are, if you just want to look at any of the journal articles that I was looking at, maybe take a quick picture, and if you type in the titles, you'll find what I looked at if you're interested in finding out more. Thank you so much for your time, and I will stop now.
Flo, that was fantastic. Thank you very much. And just to share Irene's comments, you are a great presenter, and there's some excellent tips in there. So thank you to everybody. I hope you got something, some really great ideas from that. I love the idea of movement in the classroom. I'm not sure teens really like sitting for long periods of time. Unless they're playing their Xboxes or their PlayStation, they can seem to sit for hours in that case. But I really like the ideas as well for movement when you're teaching online as well, because obviously, you know, most of the time we just seem to be behind the screen. So it's fantastic to be up and about. Deanna, thank you ever so much as well for your talk. There were some great ideas there on project learning as well and incorporating projects. Alex as well, some great ideas there. I love the idea with the photo and the time that you suggested, and actually it brings back memories of my daughter during the summer, where the teacher gave them a photo hunt of photos from around our town, and the students had to go and find the locations during the summer, which was a really nice idea, also incorporating photos. Let me just to finish off.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sharing, aren't I? Sorry.
Green, just to finish off, just quickly here. Just give me 1 second. So, just once again, thank you to Alex, Deanna, and to Flo. Alex, as always, an absolutely amazing presentation, and we look forward to seeing more of you on these Ukraine conferences. Deanna, thank you again, and congratulations on your new role that you have, and we wish you all the best for the future. And Flo, we look forward to seeing you again in the future as well on these webinars and conferences. As Flo mentioned, we have a solution for New Close-Up and for our other series. If you're looking to incorporate online practice, and actually I think that's a good point that you mentioned, Flo. So with these products that we have, such as New Close-Up, actually there is also movement. Students can do it on their mobile devices. They can do it when they're traveling. They can do it when they're going to school, for example, or, you know, wherever they are going to meet their friends. So they can actually use their mobile phones with this platform as well. Please do have a look at the Start Strong website that we have. And you'll find lots of great practical ideas if you're teaching online on the Start Strong website. And just finally, a few contact details we have. If you want to get in touch with Linguist, here are their contact details. So there's the Linguist website and the NGL Linguist website as well. If you want to find out about National Geographic Learning, please go to the eltngl.com website. You may want to join our blog there as well, which is called In Focus. So if you go to eltngl.com/infocus, lots of practical ideas from teacher trainers on that blog. And if you want to find out about online practice, you can go to the learn.eltngl.com website, or you can go to the Start Strong website as well. And if you want to find out about New Close-Up, please just go to eltngl.com and search for New Close-Up. Lots and lots of different websites there. If you want to connect to me, you can see my email address there. You can see my LinkedIn page. I think if you just search for Tim Pearce, you will see me holding up the yellow National Geographic frame. And if you want to connect to me on Instagram, please feel free to connect to me there. Alex, do you have any final words before we go?
I do. I just wanted to reiterate that I know some of you joined late. Some people might have left early, but don't worry. the whole conference has been recorded and it will be sent to you via Zoom automated email tomorrow, around about the same time as the webinar started. Along with that recording, there will also be a link to the certificate, which you can download and you can input your name as well. But just to reiterate sort of Tim's words as well, thank you to Flo, and a real big thanks to Diana for all of her work over the last few years as the NGL rep at Linguist in Ukraine. You've been amazing. It's been a pleasure working with you. I'm going to miss your face, miss chatting to you, but we wish you all the very best as well.
Absolutely.
And to everyone else, we hope that, in the not too distant future, we get to come and see you guys too.
Absolutely. I have just put a couple of links in the chat box for anybody who would like to have a look at some of those websites. And I can just reiterate what Alex has said. Diana, thank you ever so much. We look forward to see everybody again soon. Yeah. Brilliant. So I think we're coming to an end. Yeah, it's slowly coming up to tea time, as we say in the north of England, so to dinner time. So we wish you a very nice evening and a great end to the rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Stay safe. Stay well.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.